Hey, it looks like we're live. Welcome, everybody. I know that there's another live stream happening in the Wargaming world tonight, so I'd like to thank everybody who is coming into this one. And we'll probably go for the usual 2 hours or so. So, the game of the night is Barbarossa Crimea. So Chris looks like is not going to be by. John Longshore is here. Craig Campbell is here. Purple Norseman, Lead Magnet, and Richard Kerr. Thanks everybody for stopping by. So this showed up, and I guess I'm going to talk about this thing a little bit before I get into the topic of tonight. And that is games that we decided, I don't really need this, and we got rid of, and then we bought them again. So, interestingly, I had not done Robert Reese, thanks for coming in. I had not done an unboxing video for Barbarossa Crimea. And I'm not sure why. I might have picked it up before I really started doing those kinds of videos. That's possible. It came relatively early in my re-entry to Wargaming. Well, so that means I just got a new copy, and it did arrive in new condition. But this is a series, this is the GMT East Front series, and it's a series that at one point seemed to be kind of state-of-the-art for operational level East Front. And I think probably due to the fact that we haven't had a new volume in the series for about 10 years. 11 years this year, actually, unless we get a new one this year, in which case it'll still be 11 years. Or even a reprint, actually. A lot of attention has drawn away. Scram the cat away from there. Has been drawn away by other East Front options, like OCS, which has, not exactly a thunderous pace of releases. Cataclysm Now, Daniel, and Missing Seattle, thanks for stopping by. There's some interesting things going on with this system. Some interesting things that don't happen in some of the other alternatives at similar scales, like the new Jaws of Victory from New England Simulations or OCS or what have you. So I'm hoping to get enough clip tonight so that I can play the intro scenario, but we'll see how far we actually get. If I don't, I'm okay with that too. So, by the way, new microphone. The microphone's the same microphone that I've been using for a couple of years. It's the Blue Yeti, but I have a new microphone arm that will actually reach all the way over my head. So, if there are any sound issues, please let me know. Richard DeFortuna, thanks for stopping by. We're going to try and get this thing to an actual table for one of the smaller scenarios sometime relatively soon. And by sometime relatively soon, I mean sometime the next week or so. Our beverage of the evening is this stuff. This is a Kalila, no age statement, but distilled 2007 age. Well, I guess it is an age statement, age 7 years. This is from Binny's out of Chicago. It's 60.3%. So it's really, really punchy. I put a substantial amount of water in it, and it's still really, really punchy. So there's that. So this is, it's relatively complicated, but let's, I'll save the discussion of the specifics of the mechanics for another time. So the thing is that back in the 90s, and I think these started coming out in about 1997 or something like that, I had picked up the first game that ended up being in this series, which was Typhoon, which is exactly what it sounds like. I'll get to that too, Purple Norseman. Which is Operation Typhoon, so it's like September 1941 to something like January 1942, something like that. It's Drive on Moscow. The big push that almost succeeded in taking Moscow. This was followed up by Army Group, I think in this order, Army Group South, Army Group Center, and Army Group North. Army Group Center might have been first, I'm not sure. Army Group North was the last of those three, though. It's the one that I didn't have. And I got rid of them. And, around the time when I got rid of a lot of my war games, so it would have been toward the very end of the 90s or very early 2000s or something like that, and I stayed away from wargaming for a while because it seemed to me like, and I've talked about this before, there wasn't much going on in the wargaming world other than ASL. Now that turned out not to be true, but you know that's how I perceived it at the time. Still can't really taste fully, but I feel like it's coming back a little bit. Very good, very nice. Very serious though, at 60.3%. I feel like I should have put more water in it. So I want to say I had Typhoon, I had Army Group South, and I had Army Group Center. And ended up getting rid of them. Again, you know, sometime around it wouldn't have been 99 because they weren't all out by then, but this would have probably been then around 2005, something like that. So, segue, you know, 10 years later, yeah, something like that. I decided I'm going to start doing wargames again. And there's what do you know? There's wargaming actually still happening. And so I picked up what was available at the time, which was Crimea, which is relatively new, and Kiev to Rostov. And I punched them, never did much with them. There's not really a local play community of this series in town. We got a couple people who've tried it and disliked it, which, for reasons which I'm not going to say are illegitimate either. So I ended up trading them away in a pay it forward, one of those Facebook pay it forward things. And it was kind of like I had put the markers together for the two games, so I didn't split them, so I unloaded them both at the same time. Well, you know, here it is again. So I know there are, in fact, 6 games in the series total. However, I will mention that despite the notional idea that they're supposed to all be combinable, that doesn't actually work. There are reasons why that does not work as well as it's supposed to. Typhoon specifically has some differences, and again, I don't know what those specifics are there, but there's supposed to be some significant enough differences to make compatibility an issue. Not to say that you can't do it, but that if you do, it's somewhat half-assed. So, whereas, you know, something that's a more tightly constrained series, like, say, OCS, you wouldn't necessarily have that problem, or at least not to the same degree. There's also never been an explicit series rulebook. I mean, it sounds like that's changed, but it sort of hasn't. I will also point out that at one point, and I got a decent chunk of change for the Army Group South and Army Group North, and I think Typhoon too, when I got rid of those. And I'm happy to say, you know, this is good for me personally, that they are nowhere near as valuable now as they were at the time. And that's probably a little bit of a function of the sort of lack of steam that this series is, I think, experiencing a little bit. I think the attention of the community has drifted away from it because there hasn't been a game in print for 11 years. Now, the fact is, Barbarossa Crimea here, I think it went officially out of print a year or two ago, and the fact, so Enterprise Games out of Indiana still has 4 or 5 copies of it, and for the new retail price in the shrink wrap. So you can still get new ones, but it's been out of print for a while. So that's where this came from. Taking advantage of the discount from the Armchair Dragoons digital convention there. So I can't be the only person to whom that has occurred, right? Where you sold it, you bought it, you sold it, you bought it. I'm on pass 3 with these things now, so I'm officially taking the position. And my wife has always said, look, you shouldn't sell games because this exact thing happens. And that's completely right. Because this exact thing happens. So anyway, that's an annoying thing. Typhoon's on its way. Armor Group South is on its way. Armor Group North is on its way. And a copy of Balkan Front for Europa is on its way. Not related to this series, but it was one of the 2 that I actually wanted to kind of... I'm not going to try and complete that collection or anything, because those are Those are all very valuable, and I think not worthwhile as a like main hobby-centered series. But I wanted Balkan Front specifically because I find it to be on a very playable topic. Another alternative would be, say, Narvik, the old GDW Narvik, but the replacement for that from GRD was Storm Over Scandinavia, and that goes for like $200. And we're not doing that. I got a cheap copy of Balkan Front. One of the interesting things about this series is its relative... I mean, so Crimea is the smallest map area in the series, at one map. And there'll be an unboxing video of it, so if you want to see that, stay tuned for about 2 weeks. I think it's scheduled for not this coming Thursday, but and not the following Thursday, but the Thursday after that. So there'll be an unboxing, but there's like scenario maps for like most of the scenarios. So it's one map, but a lot of the other games in the series are somewhere between 3 and 5 maps. And despite that size, that's series footprint, right? The number of counters in the games in the series run from 8-something to 11-something. So none of these games are more than 4 counter sheets, which is relatively compact. Hold on one second. In terms of number of pieces for games this size, nor are there a huge quantity of markers. There's a less than 1 sheet of markers in this game, for example, and it's 4 counter sheets. So this makes me... This is not a natural segue into our Wargames today better than they used to be. But I found that to be an interesting topic, and it's a topic that's come up a couple of times in my hearing in the last couple of weeks. And Pat Mullen and I were talking about it a little bit when we spoke the other day. And he raised some interesting points. For one thing, the throwaway ratings, right? You know, whatever the BGG ratings are, who cares? I think they're not... They're skewed in too many places to be useful in any way. The landscape for creative people has changed fairly dramatically in the last 15 or 20 years, where now it is very easy, even for free, to find free software packages that do these things, that let you do things like desktop publishing and vector graphics and detailed graphics work, whatever kind of creative thing you would like to do. If you can do it digitally, the tools are out there. I used to use Campaign. I might talk about this at some point too. Campaign Cartographer. I should do a video on this because I got complaints about Campaign Cartographer. I just downloaded and installed the new version, and I'm already having crash problems with this fucking thing. So, Kaiser Bill, thanks for stepping by. So Mark, I think that's a great idea. If he's saying that if he doesn't like a game, he'll leave it for some time and have another go at it later. That's a good idea. In terms of not just dumping it, right? I'm not dumping these again. I can tell you that. We've been through this too many times, and it has caused me actually to take, as you probably are aware, there's supposed to be a game sale happening at some point, and there is going to be. But it's caused me to take a second look at what was coming out of my personal library for that sale, and decide to not get rid of one particular thing. And actually, even considering that, a couple other things ended up in the sale pile. The thing that I'm thinking I'm keeping is 1985 Under an Iron Sky, because it will be very, very difficult to replace should I need to replace it. Stigler, thanks for stopping by. He mentions that the graphic tools are a quantum leap better than back in the day. The other thing is component quality, and somebody up thread mentioned component quality already, and I think by and large, I mean we are in a hobby board gaming that's a somewhat niche, right? maybe less than it used to be, but it's still somewhat niche. And then we are a quite tiny niche inside that somewhat larger niche, right? So, bearing that in mind, are the publishers? Let's think about this from a publisher standpoint. Do we have a different dimension of publishers now than we used to? I mean, there's some big publishers, right? You know, back in the day, you had Avalon Hill and SPI, and maybe GDW, and maybe one or two other decent-sized ones. Now we have GMT and Multiman and Compass and some others. Do we have a higher or lower percentage of what we would call boutique or garage level publishers than we did before? I mean, we do have some like legit garage publishers. Grognard Simulations, for example. It's, you know, they're doing their counters in-house, that they're doing everything in-house. It's, you know, Diffraction Entertainment. They're doing a lot of their stuff in-house, not their counters or maps. So these are super, super, super small operations, printing in super, super, super small quantities. We also have, I think, a lot of I want to say outside the box understood to be the traditional box of wargaming design tools. We have more ideas coming from outside that box into wargaming than we used to have, I think, but at the same time, here's some names that John Longshore has mentioned: Jim Dunnigan, Mark Herman, both of which brought new innovations to the hobby. Richard Berg is another example. Eric Lee Smith is another example of people who innovated inside the hobby. Is that type of innovation and the scope of that innovation different now than it was, say, 30 years ago? 30 years ago would be 1990. 1990 is probably a bad time frame, but because this is hardly the war game at its peak, right? So I guess let's take SPI's output from 1978. And I'm not, we're just talking here. I'm not conducting an actual survey on what percentage of the games that SPI released in 1978 were really good games. Some of them were bad. Is that percentage now higher than it was back in 1978? The percentage from 2020 higher than it was in 1978 from any given publisher or from all publishers together. My personal inclination has always been to say that Sturgeon's law holds true and that 90% of everything is crap, and that we tend not to remember the crap, right? Run into this a lot with music. People say, oh, the music was so much better in 1968. Well, you don't remember the shitty music honestly, you don't remember the shitty music from 1968. And there was shitty music in 1968. So, but we don't remember it, right? We remember the good stuff. Or possibly the really standout bad stuff. Oh, let's get the tweets out. I always forget to do this. I'm terrible at this. So, it'd be nice to automate that. There's always some kind of technical thing going on right when I push the button. Stigler mentions that... Well, let's start with John Longshore's comment here. Games today are packaged better, have much better lipstick, but better... I don't know. Jim Dunnigan, Mark Herman, all antiques are still 25 years ahead of the pack even now. I'm not sure Mark is anymore, to be honest. But definitely at one time, for a long time, even after the fall of SPI, I think Mark stayed well on top of his game well into this millennium. And I say that only because how many really significant war games has Mark done in the last 10 years? I mean, I don't really consider Fort Sumter to be a war game. You could disagree with that, and that's fine. Waterloo and Gettysburg game. I'll be honest, I don't really care for the Gettysburg game. The Waterloo game, I think, is a little more interesting. Those are both magazine games, so they're both pretty small. This is not to take anything away from Mark. I think the Empire of the Sun is one of the best designed games in the last 30 years. Tony, thanks for stopping by. Vexed FE, thanks for stopping by. Matt Chestnut assumes that anything that came out before he was born in 1983, you kids today, has to be garbage. Yeah, maybe. I think there's some. Again, I'm going to go with Sturgeon's law here. Callendale has made the case that he thinks games today are on average better than they used to be. I'm not sure if he's right. We have to sort of dance around our personal decision of what gets to be called a war game and what doesn't. Julio says that the support, the errata, etc., has got to be better now. Maybe. Maybe. To be honest, I suspect that it's true. So, when we talk about support and errata, we got two different things we have to think about. A, how much shit needed to get fixed in the game, versus B, how much shit actually got fixed that they actually released errata for. Those are two potentially separate questions. And to be honest about it, in a lot of cases back in the day, you didn't see that much errata. Not that there weren't any mistakes, but because they didn't support it long term. And so you ended up with a lot. I'm going to have to split this Soviet Naval into two. Yeah, I think so. Into two separate compartments, I think. Yeah, maybe not. Nah, I can get away with it. Just means there's a lot of Soviet naval. Chris Mata says that, is it that games are better or just different? Area control isn't new, but Runke really shot some life into the genre with Coin. Struggle also moved the goalpost. Yeah, sure. So, I mean, we're going to see the hobby evolve as time goes on. I don't know that means better, right? We were seeing the same types of, well, not the same types necessarily, but we were also seeing innovations of similar scale back in the 70s and innovations of similar scale back in the 80s. So I'm going to say that today's games might self-evidently be better aligned with today's tastes in games. That's completely believable. And so they might seem better in some kind of absolute way on average, but I'm going to say that probably that's not true. That probably there's a similar percentage of crap than there was back in the day. I mean, I'm on the record as saying there's a fair number of that SPI stuff was not that great. Some of the Avalon Hill stuff wasn't that great. I think they had a little better success rate just due to volume. They tended to take more time with their games than SPI did. But Avalon Hill had its share of games that I think do not hold up nowadays either. So, and of course they have some that I think hold up remarkably well today, and that I would very much like to see revisited. Let me put it that way. One thing that John Longshore says, is a CD or DVD better than an LP? Well, Neil Young says no, but CDs are better. Maybe a better, more relevant example today is, what about digital music? I haven't bought a physical CD or DVD in eons. Matt says, weren't games from Avalon Hill and SPI tested in-house? Avalon Hill, I'm not sure. SPI, that was definitely happening. To what degree is a good question. And, something like a War in the Pacific or Campaign North Africa clearly probably didn't get tested that thoroughly. But on the other hand, the magazine games probably at least got slapped on a table and played a few times. Tony's Board Life says, Compass is making a fortune on designer editions of those older games, so they can't be all that bad. Yeah, but they get to pick and choose over a period of several decades of games that they think are worth bringing back and games that aren't, right? Nobody's bringing back Tito, right? They're bringing back games that people liked and that people fondly remembered. Also, I don't know that it's accurate to characterize it as they're making a fortune, but I think they, as far as I could tell, they're doing okay with those games, and that's great. But we're going to get a counter tray out in a minute here. I want to say that this is going to go in two counter trays. Well, it's going to go in two counter trays. Let me put it that way. The question is, how will it be organized into its two counter trays? SPI Stigler mentions that SPI was known for having very spotty playtesting. Some were, some weren't, especially when you consider S&T issue games were on very tight production deadlines. So yes, absolutely. You can absolutely see, I mean, you could see that exact same phenomenon happening with Decision now. The pace of magazine publication, to some degree at least, sets expectations for the rest of the company's output as well. That is a lot less true of a company like Against the Odds, where they seem to... I mean, I think they're nominally supposed to be quarterly, but that thing don't come out quarterly. It's more like one a year. Conquistador is actually one that I would like to get my hands on, believe it or not. I want the Avalon Hill version of that, though, because it has the counters for the optional rules, where the SPI one does not. U-boat is the holy grail that are great... John, you're killing me. Maybe, you might be right. I don't know. But U-boat. Somebody mentioned U-boat on Twitter, and I had to delete the reply because I didn't want to get into that with that U-boat person. That's another thing, is you got to consider that if you have a digital component to your game, how is that digital component going to work when the underlying ecosystem changes? So that's a thing, at least with our completely analog games, which I have a personal preference toward the completely analog games, but that does not mean necessarily that I might not make a spreadsheet for Federation and Empire just to speed things up, right? But that's on me. I can use whatever I want, and it's sort of optional. So, look in on the chat. 53 people here. Holy cow. Thanks for coming by. Whole bunch of people probably are here and not watching. I think Dan's thing with Stuka Joe has wrapped up, so I am 100% happy to entertain the idea that U-boat is fantastic. The only thing that I can tell you is that I am not interested in it, because I think that for the kind of game it is, I think I am better off playing a video game. And there's a whole bunch of very nice simmy U-boat video games. All right, so do infantry regiments. We have infantry regiments here. We have infantry divisions. Do that. And we have a lot more of this naval stuff than I thought we were going to have. River flotillas and that kind of thing. This is really a fascinating game system, I think. There's a lot of interesting things going on. It's relatively complicated. Oh, 2050. Well, are we all going to be dead by then? Maybe. So that's a possibility. But also, the hobby has evolved, right? We now see games included in our hobby, like U-Boat, right? I can whine about it all I want. It doesn't change anything. The new Conquistador looks less interesting to me, to be completely honest. And I believe it's called The Conquistadors, rather than Conquistador. Not sure. Yeah, I think we're going to take this naval stuff, and there's a lot of static gun emplacement type things here that we're going to put on its own, as opposed to just like Soviet Navy ground troops. There will be some video at some point on this series, by the way. And Toil asks, now are Wargame computer games better? Yes, I completely agree. It is a sort of part of Wargaming that I think has not progressed, even to the extent that I think it has the potential to progress. There's the possibility, at least, that computer war games will have enormous simulation value by taking care of all of the bookkeeping for you. And there aren't zero examples of that, but most computer war games are in fact not that. And they are all about fancy graphics and tech trees and stuff like that. I'm thinking specifically of Hearts of Iron 4, which I found incredibly disappointing, despite having loved Hearts of Iron 3 a ton. So we had a discussion about is Wargaming dying on one of the Armchair Dragoons podcasts not too long ago, a couple months ago. And Jim Orzowski, Grog of the Year, Jim Orzowski, mentioned that who cares? There's going to be Hex Encounter war games for as long as he's alive, and we're about the same age. So as long as I'm alive. So do I care, particularly that the hobby as a whole is going to trend away, from Hex Encounter war games? Even if it does, Hex Encounter war games are not going away, right? There's enough young people playing Hex Encounter stuff that Hex Encounter is going to continue, and we have 60 years, at least 50 years of history of Hex Encounter war games to draw upon, right? I mean, I'm, now poaching this stuff that's all in the 10, 15, 20-year-old things, right? The things I'm ordering aren't necessarily new things at the moment. Yes, the original Conquistador, the SPI Conquistador, was an issue of S&T, and I think there was probably some errata, and it's one of those games that I don't recall ever seeing an SPI box version of that game. They sold it to Avalon Hill, who then released it as a boxed game. And even in the S&T version, if I'm not mistaken, there were rules for the German explorers and like the Dutch bank or something like that. But you needed extra counters that you had to make by hand for those in the S&T version, whereas the Avalon Hill version gave you counters for those. See, Steel Panthers was pretty cool, but we haven't gone any further. We have the same type of thing getting released as computer war games now as we did when Steel Panthers came out. I liked Steel Panthers at the time. Did not make... So I have a label sheet that I'm working on for this counter tray. Yeah, Kaiser Bill, that's another thing that I keep mentioning, is that the hobby is dying has been a continuous stream of talk since I got into the hobby, which was in the early 80s, right? So, the hobby's been dying forever, and we're all still here. So, I think that even if we limit our hobby as wargamers to the Hex Encounter experience, and maybe we do because that's what we like, then there's still going to be more than enough for us to do for as long as we're around. John Longshore says the hobby isn't dying, the gamers are. So that's true. I mean, it's so our local gaming groups, local wargaming groups, we got about probably 8-10 people that I game with, in a normal year anyway, relatively regularly. And of them, I think 2 or 3 of them are in a similar age bracket to me. Another 1 or 2 are younger than me, in at least one case significantly younger than me. And the rest of them are older than me. So I'm about kind of in the middle of the old age pack. And I, just so we're on the same page here, I'll be 50 this year. So I'm not a youngster, but, I know a couple of actually, I call them youngsters, they're like 35, but, that are avid wargamers. So, DCB, thanks for mentioning that. I don't know what the landscape looks like for miniatures gamers. I would imagine it's the same kind of thing. I would imagine, the role-playing thing is the same way. Role-playing is dying. Role-playing games are dying. man, I hate to tell you, role-playing games are as big as they've ever been, right, like literally right this minute. Tabletop, analog, D&D type role-playing games are just as big as they've ever been. Are war games? They might be, actually. But the hobby's different, right? The landscape of the hobby's different now than it used to be. There's people that play war games that play a lot of other kinds of games, and maybe war games don't take up like the majority of their time, their hobby time. There's always there's I think more publishers now than there used to be. There's more out. I don't know if there's more publishers. There's more output now. GMT releases 3 or 4. I mean, we're counting reprints too. Generally speaking, 3 or 4 things a month, somewhere between 3 and 6 things a month, right? And plague time aside, that's a lot of releases, right? Now, some of those are reprints, and I know that, but at the same time, that's a lot of output, right? Somebody like Compass releases a thing or 2 a month. That's not a bad release pace. Somebody like Multiman, who just released their 2021 printing prospectus, by the way, which includes tons of Avalon Hill, tons of ASL stuff and a few other things. Third Winter's supposed to finally make it in pre-order. Hood Strikes North will be out. New printing of Stonewall Jackson's Way 2 will be out. Whole bunch of things will end up on pre-order, but I think that was the highlights. The ASL highlight for me is going to be Hollow Legions. It's the Italian module. All right, great chat here tonight so far. There are certainly fewer writers of rules who know what the fuck they're doing, that is for sure. That is almost certainly true, but is that a feature of editing or development rather than of rules writing? In the realities of the publishing arena today, right? Where, is there a central coordinating, is there a central editor, for example, for the company's rules? Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. Many of these places don't. It's left up to the designer and or developer or whoever they've got working on that, right? As far as the modeling goes, I want to say I feel like modeling is a bit more focused now than it used to be. There seems to be more of an awareness of, hey, the model has to deal with these specific things that I've defined that the model wants to deal with, and not necessarily try to be a generic system on top of that. Lead magnet, the internet and YouTube has made a big difference to gaming in general. Yeah, that's absolutely right, and that has been an enormous, enormous factor. The fact that, and we've talked about this in the past as well, the fact that you don't have to wonder if you have a hobby anymore, right? You can go out, and this is one of the things that struck me. I'm sure I've mentioned this before, but I'm not sure I've done it in one of the recent live streams, is when I started getting interested in doing war games again. One of the things that I did relatively quickly was check out what the ASL scene looks like. But then go to YouTube and see is there war game stuff on YouTube, and to my shock, there was. And a lot of it was good. Snooka Joe at that point had his legendary series of B-17 Queen of the Skies cooking by then. So that interface of publisher marketing and sort of social media internet presence definitely, I think, is a factor that it wasn't something you had to really worry about before. Back in 1980, you worried about getting your games onto hobby store shelves. Now, some companies don't even bother. OSG doesn't bother. You want OSG games, you order them from OSG. You call them, Kevin answers the phone. So, now my big question is, do I have more Soviet units? No, I don't. Jim L. says, 331 million people in the U.S. selling 1,000 copies of a game is ridiculous in my opinion. I bet a high schooler could sell more Cutco knives than that with just a little effort. Well, competition is a factor, and I think that's the difference, right? So back in... Boy, I'd like to see somebody actually run these numbers. It ain't going to be me. If you read Jim Dunnigan's Complete Wargamer's Handbook, he's got some actual numbers of total Wargame sales up to about 1981 or 82 or something like that. And the peak year for Wargame sales in that book, right, and bear in mind this thing cuts off 40 years ago, was like 1980 or 1981. And I forget what the number was, but you could reliably count on, say Avalon Hill selling 20, 30,000 copies of something like a Conquistador, for example. Nobody's doing that now. I mean, it's not nobody, but, say GMT can print 20,000 copies of maybe Commands and Colors. They probably can print 40 or 50,000 Twilight Struggles. Companies struggle. And I was sort of aware of this, I guess, and now I've forgotten all the details, so I can't tell you. There was a change in tax law at some point in the last 40 years. This wasn't that recent. That the net result of which means that companies are taxed on there's like standing inventory. So games cannot be kept in print forever. One of the interesting things looking through the SPI 1970, I think it's 1978 catalog that I got, was there's a little note in there that says these are backlist games. We've had to add a $2 extra to the cost to address the cost of keeping these old games in print. That was something that they were able to do, was keep everything in print. Avalon Hill for a long time kept everything in print. That's not something, and it may in part be due to this tax law change. That is something that nobody tries to do nowadays. Not in this hobby. Not in wargaming anyway. Maybe in role-playing, somebody like Wizards of the Coast might be able to do that with the D&D books. To print, just 5 years worth of inventory. Maybe they can do that. Nobody's doing that in wargaming, right? That's why some of these things just evaporate instantaneously. There will be an unboxing video, not this week, but next week, for Dogs of War, the new release from Thin Red Line Games in Italy. It took 6 days for that to sell out. Those of us familiar with Thin Red Line Games and their product line, maybe not surprised by that. That seems like a long time, and I think it is. I was like, wow, it took 6 days. Usually it takes more like 6 hours for whatever their title is to sell out. But they're printing 200 or 300 at a time. So, I mean, that's why they go instantly. There's so much competition. And remember that somebody releasing, Gary decides he's going to start Gary's Games and release a wargame this year. I'm not just competing with stuff GMT is releasing this year. I'm competing with stuff that GMT released last year, and the year before, and the year before that, and the stuff that Avalon Hill released. We have a hobby that skews older, and those older hobbyists tend to be aware that, hey, there's this game on this interesting subject. SPI did a game on this same interesting subject back in 1977, right? So maybe I'll run that down instead because I can't get this new one, right? I can't get Dogs of War, so maybe I'll run down the Central Front series from SPI, and maybe that's just as good. Maybe if you're interested in it as topic based, we have this huge backlist, and because of marketplace groups and swap groups and pay it forward groups and eBay and retailers where you can get older stuff. And I'm not going to tell you. I mean, I've already mentioned Enterprise Games. Everybody knows about Noble Knight, where you can get a lot of stuff. The funny thing with this series is the one I'm having the hardest trouble the most trouble getting is Kiev to Rostov. Easy to get Typhoon. Easy to get Army Group South. Easy to get Army Group Center if I wanted to pay $200 for it. I got a line on one that's going to cost a lot less than that. But at least if I get it, we'll see. So the competition now is not just games that have just come out, right? It's about the hobby's whole decades-long history of releases. In many cases, we can look back and say there's a lot of good games in there, right? And even if we ignore the chaff, and let's assume there was a lot of chaff, there's still plenty of good games to be had. I need to keep motorized infantry separate. I'll show you what I got going on for this is how I'm doing the organization. These are the standard little labels that happen to fit exactly into a GMT tray. Whoops. Just looking at the chat. Messing Up Rule says he just paid 4 teenage boys $400 to move $100 worth of dirt. I don't blame you. Those are some expensive teenagers, though, for $400. Making a tiny adjustment here. At some point, we might do this live, and I might do it as a recorded video. I don't know. I will do a video on how to make all this stuff at some point. Exit says that he does think it's a shame that some of the hobby is cordoned off by economic standing. He loves GMT for keeping their prices in line with the rest of board gaming. So GMT has, I'm not sure, I think I get where you're going with that, and I agree. However, I'm not sure I agree that GMT's prices are in line with the rest of board gaming. However, their prices are the best in wargaming when we start talking about their hex and counter stuff, at least. And I mean, a lot of that is they're printing in China, and it's cheaper to print in China, right? A game that is printed in the U.S. is going to cost more. Multiman's, one of the things that keeps Multiman's prices high is they print all their stuff in the U.S. It's another company that has infamously has had tons of trouble keeping their stuff in print. The ASL starter kits get printed within a month or two, they're out of print again. They cannot keep those things in print. All right, so Matt Chestnut says, when he was in high school, he probably read more rules and studied more tables from AD&D than my average wargame counterpart did in their games. I could tell you that's true for me. JPJ 5010. Hopefully Army Group Center gets reprinted this year. So I mentioned that earlier in the chat. So let me say that again. I've been kind of keeping up on where this development effort is, and those 3 games have been on P500 and have made their number ages ago. And the delay has just been with the designer Vance von Voorhis, who's had other projects and got sick, and he's had some issues. My understanding is that everything is basically done, and they are giving final components a once-over, and that they hope to deliver those final components to GMT this month. If that turns out to be the case, then we should be able to get a Q4, maybe even Q3, release of Army Group Center this year. And the idea was always that Army Group North and Army Group South would follow on that relatively quickly. But I'll be happy to get Army Group Center. It's the only one of the 6 that still goes for over twice its retail value. Missing Seattle, I don't think it's all 3 of them. I'm just talking about Army Group Center. It's the only one that's in the 5 to 9 month window on GMT's calendar. But, we can hope that they've all made their number. That's not a problem. I think it's just up to Vance, and when Vance and his team gets the stuff to GMT, then that's when they'll get printed. Matt Chestnut says the real question is whether or not poor people deserve to have a fun hobby. Without getting into the politics of it, and I've talked about this before too, I'm going to say again that it is... Any hobby can be an expensive hobby, right? Many hobbies are by nature expensive, right? So a friend of mine that I used to be in the ASL world with back in the 90s is now into World War II reenactment. There's no cheap way to do that, right? You're buying lots and lots of very expensive kit to get in, to be in that hobby at all. Wargaming is not like that, right? Let's say that, let's take the most expensive wargames you could possibly imagine. The wargames from Diffraction Entertainment. Well, let's pull it up. Let's pull up their website. And let's look at the prices. Now, there's a couple different ways to get these things. You can get them where it's like an electronic version for much cheaper. Let's look at... Well, I want to look at the one I have, which is Singapore. So let's look at Singapore. £371. Now, I'm not going to look up the exchange rate on that. That's a really... It's a very large game. It's a really expensive game. However... And let's say that turns into $500. I think that's probably not accurate on the current exchange rate, but let's say that's $500. Do you need any other games? You bought Singapore, and maybe you're going to buy one of these a year. Do you need any other games? Well, no, you don't. If you're playing this, right? You don't necessarily need to buy 50 games a year, right? I mean, if you're running a YouTube channel about it, maybe you do. But if you're just somebody that enjoys the hobby, maybe you spend a couple $100 a year on it. Maybe you spend a lot more than that, but you don't have to. You could get tons of play. I mean, you could buy Empire of the Sun and just play that, right? That thing's got a lifetime's worth of gameplay value in that box. Something like this, I don't know about this specific one, but something like Army Group, this series of games, right? Even if I was going to pay $1,000 to get all 6 games again, and I'm not, I can just play those. And there's plenty of play value in that. I can just play. I mean, if you talk about the Desert Island games, what do you take to the Desert Island? I would take Great Campaigns of the American Civil War, because I could play that and be reasonably happy as a wargaming hobbyist. Just with that. Stigler, we're talking about the East Front series. So it's not a quad, but their scenarios are pretty strong in all those games, and we might see some additional scenarios in the new one as well. Matt says, if God wanted them to be wargamers, then he would bless them with expendable income. Pretty simple. So, I mean, again, I don't want to get into the politics of it. I don't have a problem with people on really tight budgets having some discretionary income and deciding to spend a little bit of money on themselves to keep themselves sane. I don't have a problem with that. And, like I said, if you don't want to spend $1 bazillion on this hobby, you don't really have to. Is it tempting to? Yeah, sure, absolutely. You hear about the new shiny? Well, you want the new shiny. I mean, you can. If you have a gaming group, make an arrangement with your gaming group to say, okay, you buy this, and you buy this, and you buy this, and I'll buy this, and split the cost that way, right? So you can do that. Any hobby can be expensive. I mean, think about what Games Workshop players are having to deal with, right? I mean, we're not even reaching very far from board wargaming to empathize with Games Workshop players, right? I mean, those people are getting raked over the coals, right? So, you know, we're doing okay over in our corner of the hobby. Even where games are really expensive, but a lot of times those really expensive games tend to be lifestyle games where you can get an entire hobby's worth of engagement out of that list of games, right? Now, there's also this is William. This is Kalila 7-year, exclusive from Binny's Beverage Depot in the Chicago area. It is 60.3% alcohol, which means I didn't put enough water in it, and I don't have enough I don't have bottled water, so I had to go to get the distilled stuff out of the fridge. Yeah, I mean, so that's a good point. Stigler mentions comic books. I mean, back when I was buying comic books, and it's been a long time now, I mean, I was spending 30, 40, 50 bucks a week, and this is in the early 90s, right? I'm not spending that on Wargames now. And video games, a new video game, a new AAA video game is 50, 60 bucks, or 70 bucks, or sometimes 80 bucks, if it's from Gary Grigsby. So we are about to go back to the counter tray here. To say nothing of what the console costs, right? Now, I'm not a console guy, so I mean I'm avoiding that particular cost, but one thing that I'm noticing is that the yellow, there's some units with a yellow unit symbol here, and it's really hard to see in this light that the symbol is yellow. Those are militia units, and it is probably not terribly important that they be distinguished from the other things. Infantry battalions. All right, we'll put them in with the regiments. Screw it. Motorized. Armored battalions. It's an interesting counter mix here, too. We'll figure it out. Anti-tank units. See, those are anti-aircraft. Ships. This is the game in the series that has the naval component, or the biggest naval component. That we'll leave out for now. I have decided, where'd I put the tray, that we're going to put the system markers in a tray. Instant gratification is something that I think you end up wanting to see less of over the course of time, to be honest. I think it becomes less important to you as you get older. So certainly it has for me. Soviet markers. Now these bridging units are actually units, not markers. Put this here. What are the red units? I don't know what the red units are. I don't care if it's organized. I can always go through it again and put it in a new tray. Yeah, so the new Xbox sounds nice, but it's, I mean, what games do I need an Xbox for, really? The game, there was a thing on Twitter, in the last couple of days. In fact, I think today, about six best video games, and what are my six favorite video games? Right, none of them are new. Skyrim and Mass Effect 2 are on there. Those are ancient now. Skyrim came out in 2011. Elite Dangerous was on my list. That's not new. I don't need a fancy new Xbox to play that. I'm better off playing it on a PC anyway. Now, gaming PC costs a lot more than an Xbox. So, but I mean, I use my PC all the time, so it makes a lot more sense for me to have a PC that I can play games on. I agree with you, John Longshore. I would much rather have somebody else change my oil for me. I'll pay you $40 to change my oil. No problem. Yeah, PS5 is a thing. Getting them is a thing that you can't do right now. I wonder. I mean, I'm not making this as a statement. I'm asking the question. I wonder to what degree that scarcity is artificial in order to keep interest high. Super Ninja Overload Red. That's probably an actual game name, and I don't know what it would be. So, yeah, the thing is, I had the so I actually was playing Skyrim as recently as a couple weeks ago. I reinstalled it and was having fun, and I just ran out of time. But still a great game. Brant, thanks for stopping by. Yeah. AARP members are always, the AARP is dying because the members are in fact dying. As long as we can have conventions, as long as we have Vassal, we have a rich history of our hobby to draw upon. So I am satisfied that we will continue to have a meaningful hobby. Let's sort the mountain units by themselves, see how that goes. Not concerned about that particularly. Not a lot of Soviet mechanized units in this particular game, which is interesting because of the way the game works, actually. Brant is watching from the car. Hey, why not? I've done that before. Sometimes you just need to. So, again, would like to thank everybody for stopping by. We've had 62, 63 people in here, which, considering that we had another live stream happening in the Wargaming YouTube world tonight, I think is pretty outstanding. I think I have a wish list, right? And I actually use BGG for this, to manage that wish list. And that wish list is down to about 15 games now. Now there's a few other things on there that are not games but expansions to games that I have, mostly ASL actually. But that's pretty good, right? It's John Longshore mentions that a lot of things are bought online, and so on the one hand, there was a point at which I really feel for the friendly local game store. And there was a point at which that friendly local game store was the hobby hub for specific types of gamers, wargamers and role-playing gamers, in my recollection, right? And if you wanted to be involved in role-playing games, you went up to the local hobby store and hung around and asked for a while, and maybe there was a club that met up there, and that's just how it worked. Now we have the internet that is taking the place of a lot of those social networking hubs. And I don't know that that's good, but I don't know that it's necessarily bad either. I think it's evolution that we may or may not be able to stop. I am very much in favor of understanding that the hobby is evolving, that the environment in which the hobby exists is evolving, and it's going to evolve in ways that are beyond our control. I do make sure I buy some stuff from the local gaming store. I was tempted to pick up a copy of Time for Trumpets there the other day, but I didn't. I bought some dice, but I didn't buy. And I patronize the local game store when I can, but the fact is that the local game store doesn't have what I want most of the time. In some cases, I've asked the local game store, can you get ASL stuff? And they said, no, we can't get that. Is that true? No. But if that's the position that they're going to take, then I'm not going to have an argument with them. If they don't want to deal with the distributors that they can get multi-man publishing products from, then, which I know are in hobby stores in some cases, then I'm not going to buy them from them. So if the new Brant has heard of the Guard Tower, of course, because it's the most probably most famous local Columbus, Ohio gaming store. There's now a location out on the east side, and they have a surprising number of war games there. But they're all new GMT games, or there's a few things like Quartermaster General and stuff like that, and they have one or two things from Compass. And I want to say everything else they have is from. They got at least one DVG game. But if I'm not interested in that new stuff, where am I going to go? Right? I'm going to go to Noble Knight, or I'm going to go to Enterprise, or I'm going to go to something like that. I wanted Crimea, right? I can't go to the local game store and buy that. So here we go. So the local game store really can't keep everything in stock unless you're fortunate enough to live in Madison, Wisconsin, and your local game store is in fact Noble Knight. But Noble Knight is not exactly just a game store, right? They have this huge online operation that sells stuff through Amazon and eBay and on their own website. And that's why they can have this giant-ass warehouse, literally, of stuff sitting behind their game store. That's how they managed to do that. And I don't know how many of those kinds of places the current hobby could support, right? Probably more than one, but not sure it's much more than that. Used to be Crazy Igor that was that place. Here in Columbus, Brant has Gamer's Armory down in wherever the hell he's at in North Carolina. We're not that lucky here. Nevertheless, we are luckier here than John Longshore is. If I want to just say, hey, I want to go to a store with Wargames, I can go to either Guard Tower location, there's two, or I can go to the Soldiery down off of High Street, and they have some Wargames too. And they actually have a few older things as well, which the Guard Tower does not have. But they all three places also have. Nobody's really good with role-playing games around here anymore, actually. All those places used to be. And the Guard Tower has like not the Guard Tower, the Soldiery has like a warehouse sale. Once or twice a year, where they have like a warehouse that they bring stuff out, and they have quite a bit of stuff that doesn't make it to the store. But, I don't know why they would do that and then not try to sell that stuff on the side. And they need a team to do that, right? You can't just, the owner can't just manage all that, manage thousands of items on eBay and Amazon and other stuff, other places like that all at the same time. The hobby has, I feel like this is unfortunate, but the fact is that the hobby has evolved, the gaming hobby, not just wargaming, has evolved beyond the local hobby store's ability to support it. That's less true of Pokemon, but it's still true of Pokemon. I mean, unless there's an online, you could play Magic the Gathering online now. I know that. I'm not interested enough to know more than that, but I know you can do that. Our local game stores do offer, at least the Guard Tower does offer a discount. It's not as big a discount as you're going to get online, but it is nevertheless a discount. Tony Mammal, thanks for stopping by, asks if I play historical ASL, which is my favorite module. My preference in ASL is pretty much East Front stuff, actually. But that's not to say that there's not good scenarios in, say, Yanks. Just got it's not West Development anymore. It's for King and Country now. With the British stuff in it, so very curious to see some of those scenarios in action. Here in the Midwest, we have generally had strong local game store support, at least in the metro areas, right? And I'm talking about, Ohio, Chicagoland, Wisconsin, Minnesota, places like that. At least if you're in a metro area, there's a pretty good chance you got a decent game store. There's a game store up in the Cleveland area called the Matrix Warzone, Some people call it Matrix, some people call it Warzone. I call it Warzone because that's what I've called it forever. And that place does have a lot of old stuff. And if I was up there, I would totally go there, but I'm not up there. So, and I'm not going to drive there just for that. Red Factories is very much the deep end of ASL, so I strongly recommend learning the basics of the game first. If you need to learn the basics of the game, I'd go with the starter kits. They are fairly inexpensive and a good way to learn. And if you have people to play with and teach you, then by all means dive straight into full ASL. But if you are learning by yourself, go with the starter kits. Daniel says, every now and then he has a recurring dream that he's shopping for Wargames in my local hobby shop with no longer exists. Is that weird? So no, it's not. I have a recurring dream where I'm at a flea market or a garage sale or a used bookstore or something like that. You used to be able to find games at used bookstores. And I find some mother load of it. Usually it's SPI flats or something like that. I have had that dream many times and I always wake up and I'm very disappointed that I never actually found the mother load of whatever it was. John Longshore says go shopping at your own storage unit, which is a fantastic idea. I could still do that at the moment. A lot of the games that I need access to are out. Not quite everything yet. I still have some things to do. Most of the RPGs are still in the storage unit. The only RPG product I want out of the storage unit specifically is the rest of the Traveler stuff, however. For reasons that should be obvious. I mentioned this in the Patreon video a couple days ago, that it is my intention to run a streamed RPG campaign sometime in the not far distant future. Those of you who have been following along for a while will probably be surprised to learn that it isn't Traveler that I have in mind. It is a fantasy game called Against the Dark Master. If anybody is interested in that, bearing in mind that it's streaming things, so you need at least a halfway decent microphone and at least a webcam that at least works and enough bandwidth that it's not going to be a problem, email me. And I am not quite at the recruiting stage yet, but if you want to throw your name in the hat, by all means, go ahead. I'd like to do Traveler at some point as well, but that's probably a little farther away. But tune in on Tuesday when we will have... and once again, I didn't do the video. It's Monday, and I haven't done the Tuesday Traveler video yet. But we will be a Traveler video. If there isn't one in the morning, which if there is one in the morning, that means I've made it immediately after doing this, which I might not be able to do because I'm drinking this 60.3% scotch here. I might do it as a live stream tomorrow night. Matt, I'm not sure that that's a great strategy, but if that's how it's working for you, I guess that's okay. Zap units. The Zap units are like these Soviet replacement units. And they need to be in their own compartment. Another nice thing is I'm going to have this little box of system markers. Everything else is going to be able to go in the actual trays. And to be honest, I could probably get the... And I mean, maybe I still will, I don't know. It's awfully nice to be able to fit the whole game in the box, you know, that the game comes in. Exit asks, of all the available games in print right now, which GC ACW game would I recommend? I recommend all of them. However, if you want a specific title to get, then I'm going to recommend Roads to Gettysburg 2 for a couple of reasons. One, it's expensive. It's $160 or $170 retail. You can find it cheaper. You check Cool Stuff. Cool Stuff might have it. They might not. They tend to be bad about that. NWS Online will have it for less. There is an enormous quantity of play value contained in that box. And there's 3 separate modules, 2 of which are very beginner suitable, right? Not because they're dumbed down, because that's a thing I have to disabuse people of now, but just because there's good small scenarios to start you off with before you work your way up to the big campaigns. Atlanta is Ours is really good too, but it's not a starter module. It's a late war in the Western theater, which means there's a relatively larger number of special game-specific rules. It's not undoable. There's still small scenarios. You could certainly get it. But the value in the Rose to Gettysburg 2 box is so high that I recommend it. And once it's gone, that thing's going to cost $500. So once it's out of print, it's going to cost $500. So get them now. Is all I can say. So, Tony Mammal asks, what did I think of the newly released MMP production schedule? Maybe we should look at that. For those who also don't know, Multiman has completely redone their website as of literally today. Let's take a look at that. News you can use here at Ardwulf's Lair. So this is a much more modern website design. Where is the news? I don't know where the news is. I can't find anything. Let's look at it on BGG. Here we go. All right. So for ASL, we have 2 historical modules that will go up for pre-order at some point during the year. That's the Manila module, which is friggin' huge, by the way. And the Normandy one. I don't know how big that Normandy one is. I don't know anything about that, but it kind of into Normandy stuff, so that's going to be a must-have for me. As yet untitled Australian pack. Don't know anything about that. That's probably a scenario pack with a board or 2 and something like 6 to 10 scenarios. That's probably what that is. ASL Journal 13. Those are always worth your time. Again, they go for a ruinous amount of money after they're out of print, so get them when they're not. Pocket Chapter H, which is something that we've been awaiting for eons. That'll be great to have. Pocket Charts, which will replace the rat charts that people use. Those will be worth having. And the Pocket Rulebook. This is not the most exciting thing, though. We'll get to that. Supplemental Map Bundle 2. This is just more maps, the big flat box of maps. Hollow Legions will go on pre-order. That actually probably will happen sometime the next month or 2. There'll be an overlay pack, which will be like the Master Overlay pack. Where is the ASL RB will be released via Wargame Vault. This is a big deal. This is the electronic version of the ASL rulebook that we've been asking for forever. It will make it enormously easier for them to issue updates and all that stuff with this updated electronic version of the rulebook. So that was the surprise to me. I did not expect that to be this close. I am very happy should that actually go up for sale. The new fella that like business manager or whatever his name is, Brian, I forget. New business manager at MMP seems to be moving things forward in a very nice way that I approve of. Area Movement Series will be Storm over Jerusalem. That's going to go on pre-order. I saw that on a table at Winter Offensive last year. I'm not into that series. Not against it. Just not. It's not something I'm into at this exact moment. But for those who are interested in that, that's Siege of Jerusalem, basically. So Romans versus Hebrews. I'm not interested in that topic particularly, although I kind of should be, actually, because it's Romans. There's Romans there, and the Hebrews. Battalion Combat Series, Panzer's Last Stand, Eric Court. I didn't think that was anything close to ready, but okay, if that's going to be ready to go on pre-order this year, that's cool. Great Campaigns. The latest word on the next round of stuff from Great Campaigns should be released in March, April, that neighborhood. That'll be Hood Strikes North and the Stonewall Jackson's Way 2 reprint. Craig, we'll get to GTS here. And my complaint about this list. And on to Richmond 2, we'll go on pre-order. So on to Richmond 2, we'll be on to Richmond 2, Grant Takes Command 2, and Petersburg. So that is going to be another enormous, giant, value-packed package that will probably cost something just under $200, would be my guess. GTS, Race for Bastogne, will be released. It has made its number. Craig, I asked that exact same question, and the difficulty is it's not on the GTS Utah Beach, is not on this list because the playtest group hasn't turned it in yet. So my understanding is that they are really, really, really close, but at this point, I do not expect GTS Utah to be on pre-order this year. I would be delighted to be incorrect. Operational Combat Series third winter will go up for pre-order. It's been ready forever. SCS, Autumn for Barbarossa as a standalone game. For those who watched the OCS boot camp that we did last week, with the game Smolensk Barbarossa Derailed, and who said, this is an interesting topic, but I would really not want to deal with this complicated rule system. You want to take a very close look at Autumn for Barbarossa, because it is the exact same game as Smolensk Barbarossa Derailed, but with SCS rules instead of OCS rules. So there's that. Tom D, thanks for stopping by. Did I miss anything? And Special Ops Blitzkrieg to Moscow 2 at WBC sometime around mid-year. That's assuming there's a WBC. Don't count on that. So, I mean, again, I'll be delighted to be wrong, but I'm not counting on it at this point. So, I forget what our record was last week. We hit a record attendance last week here. We're up to 66 right now. I think it was 66 or 67. So maybe we can beat that. We have another 40 minutes or so on target. I'm not committed to being done at exactly 10 p.m., but 2 hours of straight talking is kind of as much as I can do. Nathan, thanks for stopping by. The Dark Summer, I'm a little surprised at myself for not being more interested in the Dark Summer, actually. And I don't know why. I am super into Normandy as a topic. I am a fan of that system as it was developed for the Dark Valley, which I have played and which I like a lot. And yet I just can't muster any enthusiasm for the Dark Summer, and I don't know why. If you don't have a Normandy game at that approximate scale, yeah, absolutely. I think it's something you definitely want to look at. The system's good. It's a chit pull system. It should play well. I just kind of feel like Normandy 44 I already have, so that's kind of my game of choice at that scale. John Longshore says someone was redoing Avalon Hill's version of Source of the Nile. That is Legion Wargames. If I'm not mistaken, the game is called Heart of Darkness, and the designer is Kim Kanger. Kanger? I don't know. It's an area movement game, and Mark, you got a citation for that Battle for Normandy going to be re-released, or is that just talk? Because I've heard the talk. If someone has actually announced that, I would be very interested in finding that announcement. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying if it's been announced, I want to see the announcement. Battle for Normandy is a pretty good game. I think it could use a new edition. For a couple of reasons. One, I frankly think that it needs a little bit of tightening up. And two, it goes for a stupid amount of money on the secondary market. And it's a pretty good game. If you don't like chit pull, you will not like the Dark series from Ted Racer. I don't have a problem with chit pull, however. The designer, I'll look at that. Let's take a look at that. I'm interested enough to look at that. If you could find that and want to throw the link in the chat, I would appreciate it. Yeah, Heart of Darkness does not look like it's definitely not a straight redo of Source of the Nile. Let me tell you that. It is the same theme, with more modern-looking mechanics. Source of the Nile is not something that would be produced today for a variety of reasons, only one of which is the politics of that topic. You know, I kind of like chit pull as well, but here's the thing. If it's just, here's the pool of chits, and you're drawing chits, and things are happening in the order that you draw them, I'm thinking Panzer battles, SCS Panzer battles, I don't think that's particularly interesting. If you have a chit pull system in which you have to make decisions about the chit pulls, like you see in Great Battles of the American Civil War, or in GTS, or even in what's the other example? Even in the Dark Valley, where you have the pool of chits evolves over time. I think like a straight chit pull mechanic, I think, is not particularly interesting. But I'm also happy that I've not really played very many of those. Panzer Battles is really the only one where it's been just like a straight, boring, bland-ass chit pull system. Nobody wants that. Just looking at Battle for Normandy here, and I'm not seeing anything about that coming back out. Now, I know there's rumor of that. And I personally will be happy if those rumors turn out to be true. Like I said, I just want confirmation if that turns out to be the case. And I'm not seeing it here offhand. Kaiser Bill says he thinks one of the best things in Wargaming happened when games got away from I move all my units and attack, and then you do the same thing. So like the classic I go, you go, which is what you're describing, the pure I go, you go, is something that I think, for the most part, outside of really narrow applications, I think is not a suitable mechanic anymore. If you have like a super focused, newbie-friendly game that's small, maybe you can make it work. Otherwise, I don't think that's a great idea. I personally always find, too, that at least for operational or tactical games, that for me, there needs to be some kind of command control limitation mechanic. Somehow, your ability to do absolutely everything you want has to be limited. There's any number of... That's not a new idea, right? ASL, or the original SL, actually, did that. It's just, it's kind of random. Tony asked, how would I compare complexity of GCACW with ASL for those not well-versed? So, GCACW is nowhere near as complicated as ASL when you look at the totality of each game system. It's not close. Your average GCACW game in its basic game is probably more comparable to ASL Starter Kit number 1, and then maybe your campaign game is around the level of ASL Starter Kit number 3. That's a absolutely rough, description. That said, a lot of people find the GCACW rules a bit challenging because they are not entirely conventional. The good news with that is that there's a ton of video on YouTube at this point walking you through sample games and explanations. A couple of those are on my channel, but the best source for that is Patrick Pence's channel. He's one of the folks that's involved in the tournament scene for GCACW, and he has got tons and tons and tons of scenario walkthroughs and tutorials and all kinds of stuff. I mean, if Dan says it's going to be out this year, okay. I just want to see Dan saying that. I just want the confirmation that he thinks that's reasonable. And who's going to do it? If it's supposed to be GDW, it ain't going to be out this year. I'll tell you that right now. I wouldn't say, John, I wouldn't say ubiquitous. It's definitely popular, though. And I think it's one of the ways, if you have an interesting chit pull system, it's one of the ways in which you can reflect command control limitations, where you can't necessarily do everything you want to do exactly when you want to do it. It's an easy way to do that without necessarily giving you additional mechanic overhead. So that, I think that's why I see the thread you're talking about. All right, so Dan's working on Battle for Normandy 2. That's cool. I see the thread you're talking about. And Dan's last wording on that was in October. I hope he's right. I hope it comes out. But at the same time, it's got to get through a publish, unless Dan's going to self-publish, which he's done before. In which case, he doesn't have to pay attention to what publishers are saying. But if it's going to come from GMT, then if he sends it to GMT tomorrow, it's going to come out in 2022 at the earliest. So just because of that's not official information, that's just my guess, but I'm guessing I'm right. So all right, so we are definitely going to have to. Ooh. A lot of infantry, shockingly. All right. Yeah, so John Longshore says that he thinks everyone thinks the big massive monsters are the big money makers for game companies, and he's right about that. At least if you ask Multiman, they'll tell you that, and I suspect Decision will too. They're still sitting on copies of War in the Pacific, and advanced PTO after all these years. Now the aftermarket people, the speculators, can definitely make a killing on this stuff after the fact. I feel like, that's the problem. I figured it out. I was eating like 6 compartments of Soviet naval units. I'll put the infantry in one compartment and the rest of them in another one. Yeah, a lot of people like. Now, I mean, I'm fine with the older GBOH not chit pull mechanic too, but a lot of people do seem to like the hoplite version as well. And I want to say that wasn't the first GBOH game with chit pull either. One of the earlier ones may have had chit pull as well. Oops. There we go. So it looks like we're in pretty good shape here. As far as Soviet units go, except that we're going to put the rocket artillery with the regular artillery. There's not enough separate rocket artillery's units. No, we have not gotten Lucky Forward down yet. It'll happen at some point. It's not the kind of thing I can get to a table quickly necessarily. And it's funny you should mention that, John, actually, because one of the other things I got, as you might have seen the video for Outreach, which was kind of one of my regrail type things. And, you know, I got it. It's great. I ordered a copy of Star Soldier as well. And, not Star Soldier, Star Force, okay? Now, Star Force is an interesting game in a lot of ways. One of the things that is interesting, but not necessarily in a good way, is that it uses numbered chits instead of dice. Now, I suspect it's just a matter of when it was released, because it was released in the 74, I think, and it uses a 1 to 10 system, and it probably D10s were SPI didn't know where to get D10s at the time. However, something I noticed is that I got a punched copy of it, and the number 9 chits are all punched clipped way more aggressively than all the other numbers. So whatever cheating bitch owned that game back in the day, they had clipped their counters in such a way that they could pick the chits that they wanted out of the pool, which does mean that the counters are not in great shape. Let me put it that way. That's kind of okay. If I was going to play it, I would probably play it on Vassal anyway. Actually, that's a game that might actually do okay on Tabletop Simulator, because the density on that is going to be spectacularly low. Did Callendale do a video on Outreach? I don't remember that. I'll have to check for that. So, Tom D mentioned CDGs, card-assisted games. There's certainly a huge selection of those nowadays. I don't have a problem with the idea, nor do I have a problem with any specific implementation of it, I guess. I mean, so there are examples of the card-driven or card-assisted games that I don't like, but I don't think in any of those cases that the fact that it was card-driven was necessarily the problem. The one I'm thinking of off the top of my head, because it came up in conversation not too long ago, was Age of Napoleon from Phalanx, which I didn't think much of. But that's just because I didn't think much of. I'll have to check that out, because I would totally watch a Callendale playthrough of Outreach. I'll watch anybody's playthrough of Outreach, actually. At some point, I would like to do a playthrough of Outreach. It's quite soloable. There are solo scenarios. Another thing that just showed up, actually in the same box as Crimea here, was SPI's Universe, which does in fact include two 20-sided dice numbered 1 to 10 twice, which were probably intended as percentile dice. It came with a counter tray, too. I don't mind the SPI. So, the SPI in the box counter trays, I actually like those. The flat trays I'm not a fan of. They're just too difficult to store, too difficult to deal with. And I own exactly one of them at this point. So that's a bit irritating. At the moment, it's not creating a problem because it's position. I have a specific shelf spot for it. So it's not creating a real issue. But at some point it might. I did glue the tray back together. I glued the cardboard back on the tray. And I just used a Elmer's glue all. I didn't go find artisanal glue or anything like that. It used to be that because the D10s are not platonic solids, you used to be able to get the platonic solids in dice types, so you could get D20s but not D10s, and the standard D10 for a few years was out of everybody but D&D. D&D didn't do this. D&D had D10s because they had their own people making dice by then, but Avalon Hill and SPI I definitely saw a lot of those D10s, those D20s that are numbered 1 to 10 twice. I have several of those. I still have my original D&D, well, some of the original D&D dice. My original ones, which are those like really soft plastic ones that turn into spheres really easily. Yes, Universe is very much a not really super playable intended competition for Traveller, and I think it failed at that, and I think that's why it failed. Nevertheless, I think there are some interesting things in it, and I picked it up because I wanted to mine it for Traveller use at some point in the future. Gregory asks, a practical way to assess the when is better question is if you were to play one game about a given topic, which decade was it published? That's an interesting light in which to view that question, actually. So let's say that there is a... I'm trying to think of a concrete example. Okay, so the American Civil War. Games that treat the whole topic of the American Civil War. A lot of people are going to point at... Some people might... there's 3 games I have in mind specifically. There's really 4 if you count for the people. The Victory Game Civil War. Probably a lot of people who remember that game will point out that that is the definitive choice of game on that topic at that scale. Other people will point out the GMT U.S. Civil War. Please stay tuned for news about that title. And there's the old War Between the States. Actually, I think if you look at War Between the States, and I've played War Between the States, I think you'd be surprised how much the Victory Game Civil War leaned on War Between the States. It is a better game in absolutely every way. The Victory Games game is a better game in absolutely every way. But you can also see that a lot of its ideas came out of War Between the States. And maybe War Between the States got them from somewhere else. And that's about a 1976, 1977 game, where the Victory Game Civil War was about 1983. Brant, I don't know that Universe is quite that complicated, but it was definitely of a piece with the kinds of RPGs that predominantly Wargame publishers were producing in that era, and they would for the next several years. Avalon Hill had its own examples with things like Powers and Perils, which is another game that I've actually played. I've actually run that. I have a quite high opinion of U.S. Civil War. House Divided is another one, and you know what? You're right about that. There are people who, when asked, and that's a game that dates from the 80s, if I'm not mistaken, when asked for their definitive, top-level American Civil War game, will name a House Divided. I think those are a minority. I think the War for the Union people are going to be a minority, too. That has recently been re-released by Compass. Is that out? I think that's out. I'm pretty sure that's out. I have no opinion on that game. I gotta tell you. It has... There are people that like it. They are in the minority. Let me put it that way. The single... So, I mean, what does that mean, then? If we say, well, I kind of got it all over the place, right? I mean, I got a couple titles from the 80s. I got a couple titles from the, 2010s. I think For the People came out originally in about 1995. That's probably not quite right. But it's probably not dramatically off. So yeah, I mean, what does that mean? I mean, you're kind of all over the place depending on who you talk to, which is exactly what you would expect to see if there was not a correlation between age and game quality. You would expect to see opinions all over the place. There are people who will tell you that the Victory Game Civil War is the best one. I have enormous sympathy for those. I don't want to say sympathy because that makes it sound like I feel bad for them because they're wrong, and I don't think they're wrong. I think I am sympathetic to that point of view. But I also think that the Mark Simonich U.S. Civil War is also really strong, and improves on the Victory Games title in a number of ways, but not in all ways. So we played War Between the States in 2019, and it is a game that has a decent number of really good and interesting ideas in it, and in aggregate, the whole thing just kind of gives you historical results, but the whole thing doesn't work right. The scale is off. The scale makes it less functional. The scale is the turns are essentially weekly, and so you're playing out the whole U.S. Civil War on 3 maps, right? So, U.S. all the way west out to the edge of Missouri, the western side of Missouri, on 3 maps, and the turns are weekly. So what you end up with is a turn structure such that many leaders just don't ever get to go. McClellan only gets to go on a roll of 1 on a 1d6, for example. I think that's how it works. It's a 1 in 6 chance, I can tell you that. And that just sucks. I mean, it kind of works, but it's crappy gameplay. So the biggest notable single difference between U.S. Civil War and the Victory Game Civil War is that there is a sort of dynamic leader system in U.S. Civil War where leaders come in, depending on the results where they go and what they do. They might get promoted, they might get killed. You never know. The U.S. Civil War does it all on a schedule. Leaders come in on a certain date, they get promoted on a certain date, they die on a certain date and exit the game. A lot of people don't like that. That is a view that I am also very sympathetic to. There's reasons why Semenich did it that way that I don't necessarily even disagree with, but I also feel like it feels really funny, and I don't think that it's done in order to address certain gamey things that would happen in the Victory Game Civil War, but all it does is it creates different gamey things that happen in U.S. Civil War, because you know exactly when Stonewall Jackson's going to go away, for example. So, yeah, I mean, there's some interesting things going on. Also, victory or defeat comes down to a die roll. You literally roll it. You roll it on a table to see if somebody won the game that turn, and I think that's a shitty game mechanic. So there's some problems. What I'm really surprised about with U.S. Civil War is that nobody has come up with a variant leader system that fixes that. To my knowledge, maybe somebody has, but to my knowledge, nobody has, and I don't know why. I think the way the leaders work, and I say this as somebody who got U.S. Grant killed on turn friggin' 2, I think the way that there are certain gamey things that end up happening in Victory Game Civil War that are maybe undesirable, but they are not necessarily ahistorical. Scrubs like John C. Fremont got cashiered. So, I mean, there's complaints I could make about the way the leaders break down in the Victory Game Civil War 2, but I think the overall mechanic is... Brant, thanks for stopping by. I think the overall mechanic is a lot more satisfying in actual play. A lot of the other things, like the pulse mechanic in U.S. Civil War, which is very similar... Again, stay tuned for this. There's a plan to bring just a playthrough video of that. And you can also go back and see playthrough video of the Victory Game Civil War on this channel already. Plenty of room. So the pacing mechanism of the pulses works in effect in a very similar way in U.S. Civil War, but it actually works better, I think, in U.S. Civil War than in Victory Game Civil War, because it's a lot simpler and it doesn't need to be any more complicated. So I just prefer the initiative system in U.S. Civil War. We're putting these in here, I think. I think we're going to be able to get... So the rule of thumb is that... I think we were up to 66 or 67, actually, John. Actually, it looks like we were up to 72. That would be the new record. By about 4 or 5. So, the rule of thumb for half-inch counters is that I can comfortably get 2 counter sheets in one counter tray, one GMT standard counter tray. By the way, there is now a counter clipping Facebook group dedicated to counter clipping. So, we might have been at 67 just a second ago. We were at 72 about half an hour ago. So, again, that's amazing considering that there's another... No Enemies Here did a conversation with Stuka Joe that he was on right at 8 when I came in. And when I was like setting this stream up, I'm like, really? Dan, you're killing me here. You're putting this on at the same time as I'm doing this? And I know he knows what time I come on at because I put it on his friggin' show. So, damn it, Dan. Just for this, I'm going to punish you in this week's video clip. We'll see if that actually happens. I am flabbergasted that 72 people stopped by stopped by for this tonight. And honestly, I mean, it's gone a little bit up and down, but generally speaking, the first time I did this, I ended up with a peak of like 40-some people. I'm like, wow, that's great. Let's keep doing this. And we kept doing this, and here we are. So, Kenneth, thanks for stopping by. There was an argument, like an actual argument, too, on Console World not too long ago about somebody who feels that the Victory Game Civil War Leaders system is busted because it doesn't do certain things, and then it gets pointed out to him that, well, it does do those things, and furthermore, your changes will break it worse. So, you know what? I am not the person... I know Dan blames me for this at this point, but I am not the person that came up with that. Gregory Smith is the person who, I think it was Gregory M. Smith, that came up with that when Dan interviewed him at WBC. He mispronounced his name. I think he called him Dan. Dan Capaldi, which I thought was hilarious. So I just riffed on that. That's how that thing works. Hold on, let me do that. And I'm Grant. That's my Grant impression. It's a pretty good Grant impression, actually. I think, anyway. Not you, Dan. The other Dan. So, well, thanks for piping up in the chat. Then I know lots of people are super active in the chat, and some people are probably just chilling and listening to the stream, and that's totally fine. There's not a lot of visual appeal in these things, to be completely honest about it. So I do appreciate, and I think I mentioned this last week, my wife would like to extend her thanks to you all, too, because she has said, thank God those people will listen to you. This way I don't have to. So I have enormous thanks for all of you for stopping by. We have about... So my Alexander impression, I also have an Alexander impression, but it sounds way more like I'm making fun of Alexander. And if I'm gonna make fun of Alexander, I gotta do it about the shirts, right? So there's that. If through some unhappy mischance anyone watching here is not already subscribed to the Players Aid, go over and subscribe to them. They're fantastic, and they're 10,000 subscribers. Which is the biggest wargaming channel by a ton. By handily double. Callendale's got a lot, too. So, Dan mentions why I want to play against the Darkmaster. So, I have a copy coming, and I got the PDF. So, I've been looking through it, and it is not... I'll have video on this eventually. It is not... Wardrobe, thanks for stopping by. It's not a retro clone exactly. I kind of figured it was a retro clone of Middle-earth role-playing. The old Iron Crown Enterprises Middle-earth role-playing. Yeah, I don't have any shirts like that. And that was not MERP so much as Rollmaster. I was a big fan back in the day, so it was super attractive to me that somebody would try to do that. Looking at the finished game, it departs from MERP in... enough ways that I think it doesn't qualify as a retro clone, but nevertheless, it is a return to the central ideas of MERP and Rollmaster, and therefore it is very exciting. I got the PDF a week or so ago, and I immediately got excited about doing something with it. So we'll see what happens. I am overdue to do an RPG thing. Rolemaster Unified is on its way. I haven't looked at it in years, so I don't know where they're at with that right now. And Rolemaster was my main RPG for a good decade. And for a lot of that decade, we did Rolemaster, what was at the time called Rolemaster 2. And then we moved to Standard System. And while there are a number of things about Standard System that I like over Rolemaster, what's now called Rolemaster Classic, there are also a number of... It's really bloated. That skill system is really bloated. It's got way too many skills. And you notice how they, like, increase the number of skills by, like, 2 orders of magnitude, but they didn't give you any extra points to buy them with. That right there tells you this is broken. So, not a huge fan. Oh, cool. Barbarossa Crimea Wardrobe just ordered it as well. I have a vague idea that, considering that I'm actually done as of right now with the Soviets, that I might be able to get this to a table with the smaller scenario, the Tartar Ditch, which is the introductory scenario, which is not played on a mini-map, so I could do video on that and everything. Now, that said, what may end up coming out of that might not be good video, because it might be too slow. Yeah, we're not going to have a second of those. I'll be crawling around under the desk. You'll notice last week I had like 3 or 4. This time 1 was enough. It was a healthy one. I don't have a ton of this left, but it's been sitting here for a while. So Kalila is my favorite. So Alexander will probably kung fu your ass. Is all I got to say. He unruffle that shirt of his and he'd kung fu your ass into unconsciousness. So, yeah, I don't promise, Wardrobe, I don't promise any specific schedule, but I am working on it, so we'll see. I got to do the sale video first, because the sale video is going to eat the space that I have to run to have that game set up in. And it will take me at least several days, even with the small scenario of doing it. So we'll see. I'm really looking forward to Against the Dark Master. So like I said, Ardwulf's Lair at gmail.com. If anybody wants to email me because you're interested, you need a webcam and a working microphone, neither of which has to be like of outstanding quality or anything like that. You just got to have them. And we'll do it on Discord. So we'll just do it on the Ardwulf's Lair Discord server. At some point, I've been meaning to do this for a while, I'm going to open up the Discord to viewers in general. That's been a patron-only thing, and I need to redo the patron tiers. So, next unboxing is C3I Magazine number 34. The one after that will be which it just uploaded today, is the Dogs of War, which is the new Thin Red Line C3 series game, and the unboxing after that will be Barbarossa Crimea. So I guess this means how much did I get done? I got 1 full counter sheet done, right? No, I got 2 full counter sheets, right? No, I got 1 full counter sheet done. This counter sheet is all for other modules in the series, so I don't actually have to do this one. Yeah, we'll sort this out that way. I am going to put the whole game inside the box, I think. I have these extra counter sheets as well. If anybody has any last-minute questions, let's mention them now. These extra counter sheets that were given away by GMT at Consum World Expo, and then which I wasn't at, and then somehow made their way to me. And those are from this series as well. So what this means is that what probably is going to happen is I'm going to continue trying to rustle up a copy of Kiev to Rostov, and that I am probably going to wait for the reprint on Army Group Center. John Longshore says playing the Soviets in any game ever is depressing. I disagree. If you've ever played them in Baltic Gap, they're tons of fun to play. Bear in mind that largely that game is Soviets on the offensive. Third Winter's the same way, though. It's mostly Soviets on the offensive. Tons and tons of fun. That's my favorite OCS game, by the way, is Baltic Gap. I haven't actually played. Is that true? It might be true. It might not be. I'm not sure. I haven't played a meaningful amount of it. I can tell you that. So we're going to try and start with the light scenarios. There are one of the really great things about the series. You'll see this in the unboxing video. Is there's a lot of mini-map scenarios. There's like 4 or 5 different mini-map scenarios in Crimea, for example, and all the games are like this. So I can play like the whole game scenario, setup card map, and everything is on like an 11 by 17 piece of paper. That's really nice. Yes, Tony, I would like to mention that as well. I tremendously been enjoying your GBOH stuff. Keep that up. The mini-map scenarios are fantastic. Now, this is a one-map game, right? So it's not like the main campaign is a 5-map game, like it is in Kiev to Rostov is a 5-map game. So you don't necessarily need to set the whole thing up, right? And this one, even if you do set the whole thing up, you're getting a good, meaty campaign experience without necessarily an enormous footprint. And looking at the scenario number 2, which is the Odessa scenario, Odessa, the hero city, is Romanians trying to take Odessa, and that's a meaty scenario. That's like a 20 or 30 turns. It's like a 20-some turn scenario. I honestly, Wardrobe, I really feel like it's probably just that it hasn't seen a release or even a reprint in 11 years. I think that's all it is. Tom, I think my opinion on this, I mean, different people will tell you different things, is I don't think they're necessarily better or necessarily worse. I think in some ways they are obviously better. Like, component quality is generally speaking better today than it was back in the day. Art quality is generally speaking better today than it was back in the day. In terms of rules, I don't know. I mean, today's games are coming out in a different environment than games of yesteryear. The wargaming hobby was a little more self-contained back at the time, with a less impact coming in from other game types, with the exception of role-playing games, actually, because role-playing games arose out of wargaming, right? More miniatures gaming, but not divorced from board wargaming either. And there's a huge interface, and maybe I got an idea that we'll do that as a topic. Maybe we'll do that next week. I said that last week, is the interplay between board wargaming and role-playing games, which GDW got a whole genre of games out of. For example, somebody is speaking Spanish in the chat, and I don't speak. My Spanish is not that good, so I don't say I don't understand any of it, because I did take Spanish and I spent 2 months in Mexico, but that was a long time ago. So yeah, I don't think there is a consensus. I don't think I have an opinion that it's about the same. So no, my answer is no. I don't think today's war games are better than yesterday's war games or yesterdecade's war games. I don't think they're automatically better. In some respects, maybe they are. In other respects, maybe they're not. I think on balance, it about balances out. So that is my opinion for that. So we are after 10 p.m. here in the Eastern Time Zone. So I would like to once again thank everybody for stopping by. We'll do this again next Monday. I'm starting to look forward to these things now. We did hit another record this week for 72 viewers. That is amazing. And I would like to thank everybody for stopping by. Once again, thanks again. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. For some reason, a lot of the people that watch the videos are not subscribed. It's just a metric that lets me keep track of channel growth, I guess. That John Longshore, that is a great topic that we might revisit at some point. But I'm still working on the GBACW versus Line of Battle showdown. If I can get that to happen and it is successful, then I will totally do things like OCS versus East Front Series and other face-to-face showdowns like that. And for that matter, I'd like to do like War in the East versus Europa or something like that. That would be really cool. But I need people who will like play ball on both sides, and that's not going to be me. So again, thanks again, everybody. Stay tuned for future videos coming this week. What's coming this week? Tomorrow, Traveler Tuesday, which might be a live stream tomorrow night. Just FYI, if I don't get the video done. And on Thursday, there will be a unboxing video, which is C3I number 34. The plan is, this could change, but the plan is to play live on Sunday. We're probably talking 5 to 7 p.m., something like that. U.S. Civil War live. So stay tuned for that if you want to check that out. Again, thanks again, everybody. Everybody have a great night, and we'll see you all soon.